Hello and welcome. Today I'd like to begin our journey cruising down the Nile River, talking about the ancient Egyptians between the years 3500 and 1100 BC. This slide depicts a map of ancient Egypt. Geographically, Egypt consists of territory approximately 30 miles wide and 800 miles long. Egyptian civilizations were located in warm climates where the land was relatively flat. Rainfall was limited, but the rivers periodically flooded. Hieroglyphics is a Greek term meaning sacred carvings. It is the oldest form of Egyptian writing composed of pictograms, phonograms, and ideograms. The hieroglyphic system used in ancient Egypt had between 700 and 800 basic symbols called glyphs. This number grew in the last centuries of ancient Egyptian civilization because of an increased interest in writing religious texts. Egyptians wrote hieroglyphics in long lines from right to left and from top to bottom. They did not use spaces or punctuation. Phonograms are glyphs that represent sound. Ideograms are signs that represent what they mean. An ideogram representing a fish will be related to the notion, quote, fish. One ideogram can be used to express several different notions. The following two slides are examples of hieroglyphics found in ancient Egypt. In the ancient world of Egypt, cartouche hieroglyphics were used to form an oval plaque representing the birth name of pharaohs, queens, and other persons of high standing. So, for example, the cartouche in this slide is this feature right here that I'm outlining. This is the cartouche, and within this plaque, you can see the hieroglyphics that would then represent the pharaoh Tutankhamun. This slide represents another example of the term cartouche. All right, designers, find the cartouche in this slide. Hint, it's on the left-hand side. Characteristics of Egyptian art. Egyptians covered most interiors and exterior surfaces with some type of decoration, often scenes that were either painted or carved in low relief and subsequently in blues, greens, yellows, and reds. Most figures stood on a ground line rather than being suspended in space. Notice the human head is usually shown in profile. The eyes are shown frontally, and shoulders were shown frontal, allowing both arms to show. Another characteristic is the depiction of men versus female. Notice that the men are painted with a red-orange complexion, while the women are shown with more of a yellow ochre complexion. Once again, pay attention to how the men and women are depicted. The men with the red-orange complexion and the women with the yellow ochre. Notice also that the human figure was drawn with the face, legs, and feet in profile, while the shoulders and one eye were drawn in frontal view. Pay attention to the following slides. They are images of tomb paintings. These images were taken in 2019 when my husband and I toured Egypt. Most of the tomb paintings were accomplished by a technique known as fresco. And fresco is a process whereby painting is accomplished by applying pigment to wet lime plaster. Another popular technique used by the Egyptians to paint was fresco secco. This term refers to painting on a dry surface. The technique was widely used, but had a huge disadvantage. The disadvantage was that the painting was subject to flaking, and therefore much has been lost. The advantage was that the pigment, when it was applied to a dry surface, was much more brilliant and vibrant than those frescoes where the pigment had been applied to the wet lime plaster. This slide depicts a wonderful mural painting. Now, the purpose of mural painting was to tell a story, to record history, or to show various consecutive phases of some event. The subject matter was representative of actions in everyday life. Another interesting characteristic of Egyptian art: principles of perspective were ignored. Depth was indicated by placing one figure above the other. One last characteristic of Egyptian art, and that characteristic relates to scale. Notice that the pharaoh and the queen are much larger in scale than the slaves and ordinary people. This is known as hieratic scale. Once again, hieratic scale. That means the people that have the most power and are the most important are shown in drawings and paintings larger in scale than those people with less power. The following slides are just a few of the many popular motifs that were used in Egyptian designs. Please pay attention and be able to identify the motifs and their terms, as you will need to know this for the unit tests. The galoche motif consists of a band pattern that uses interlacing curved forms. The spiral motif is a design that begins with a sharp curve and winds outward, always from the central point. Nature has endowed Egypt with large quantities of hard and durable building stones such as granite, sandstone, and limestone. Now, granite is a coarse-grained, light-colored, hard, igneous rock. It consists chiefly of quartz. Sandstone is a sedimentary rock composed mainly of sand-sized mineral or rock grains. Most sandstone is composed of quartz and or feldspar. And finally, limestone. Limestone is a sedimentary rock composed largely of the mineral calcite, which is calcium carbonate. Trabeated construction is an important term to know. So once again, with trabeated construction, we have a series of lintels right here at the top. Lintels run horizontally, and the lintels are held in place by a series of columns, and the columns run vertically. You may have heard of the term post and lintel. Post and lintel is just another term for trabeated construction. This slide depicts the typical column of ancient Egypt, along with some terminology that I'd like you to know. The first term, architrave. Basically, the architrave is the horizontal band that is composed of lintels. So the series of lintels is collectively known as architrave. Now, below the architrave is the abacus. The abacus is the slab or pillow that forms the top of the capital of a column. Underneath the abacus is the capital. The capital is the head of a column or pillar. The capital then is supported by the shaft. The shaft is defined as the central portion of a column or pilaster between the capital and the base. And finally, the base. The base is a series of moldings at the bottom of the shaft of a column. This base helps to distribute the weight. In order to understand how furniture became an integral and inseparable part of interior architectural design, it is necessary to review specific types of Egyptian structures. During all Egyptian periods, architectural development consisted of tombs for burial, temples for religious practices, row houses for the general population, and palaces or villas for the wealthy. This image is a close-up of the Great Pyramid. It was taken in 2019 when my husband and I visited Egypt. I really want you to pay attention to the size and scale of the stone in relationship to the people. Egyptian temples were dedicated to one or more gods and goddesses. They were places where priests performed daily sacred rituals for their deities, represented by golden statues. The gods were washed, clothed, and fed by the priests in dark, mysterious inner sanctuaries. These were not places where ordinary people came to worship, though people did get the opportunity to see their gods on special festival days. The Egyptian temple was characteristically comprised of the following. First of all, you would have the Avenue of the Sphinx. This avenue would originate at the Nile River and continue perhaps for miles, leading to the specific temple. It was the job of the Sphinx that are lined on this avenue to protect the temple. So once you arrive at the temple, you would be greeted by a pylon. And the pylon is the monumental gateway to an Egyptian temple. The pylon would consist of a pair of tower structures with slanting walls that flank the entrance portal. So from the pylon, you would then enter the courtyard. The courtyard was an open space which was then enclosed on its sides. From the courtyard, you would enter the hypostyle hall. Hypostyle is a term that means a hall in which the ceiling or roof was supported by columns. Now, the purpose of the hypostyle hall was to symbolize spiritual transition. It was a spiritual transition from the phenomenal world of this life to the mystical realm of the next life. And then from the hypostyle hall, you have the naos or sanctuary. And this is the area which contained the statue of the god. Ordinary Egyptian villagers lived with their families in simple mud brick row houses. These were built to stay cool with small windows, an open air kitchen, and roof terrace. There was not much living space, and the houses were generally quite bare, with little furniture apart from a few low tables, stools, and beds. In many houses, the living room had to serve for eating and sleeping. The row houses were built out of sun-dried mud bricks, and the floors were covered with mud plaster. The walls were coated with limestone plaster, and some may have been decorated on the inside with paintings. The flat roofs rested on wooden beams. Steps led up to the roofs from the open-air kitchens, where there were usually clay ovens. A commonality among Egyptian houses of all classes was the use of the tripartite plan. Now, tri means three, so the plan would have been divided into three parts. The first part would have included the reception area, which would have been here. The second part is described as being a central hall or living room area. So section 2, and then the third part would be the private area, which most likely would include the bedroom. So tripartite. Outside of the towns, where land was not at a premium, more space could be devoted to the country villa, with its walled enclosures and dependencies. Dependencies would include perhaps the chapels, granaries, kitchen storerooms, a chariot house, servants' quarters, and stables, all within the walled enclosure. Once again, a tripartite plan was used. We can see with this country villa, here would be the first component, the entrance hall. The second component of the tripartite plan would be the main hall, and then the third would be the private area or the bedrooms. So once again, we see use of that tripartite plan. When we begin to study Egyptian furniture, most of the surviving examples have come from the discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb. The tomb was discovered in 1922 and has provided the world with a much more accurate image of the lifestyle, furnishings, and decorative arts. Now, the survival of this furniture is due to the Egyptians' firm belief in life after death, which resulted in the taking of worldly goods suitable for one's status in the present life into the tomb for use in the afterlife. With this slide, there are a few terms that I want to point out. The first term relates to the seat. Your book describes the seat as being saddled. Another term that would describe the seat is double-coved. Notice that it's curved in both directions, hence the term double-coved. The other characteristic that you'll see on a lot of the stools and a lot of the chairs is this block of tapering wood that's referred to as a drum. So on top of the drum, then characteristic of the Egyptian time period is the use of the lion paw. So we see the lion paw sitting on top of the drum. And once again, the drum was a block of tapering wood. I hope you've been enjoying the work of the ultra-talented Egyptian craftsmen. Just once again, want to point out down here the use of the drum, the use of the lion's paw, and then one other thing to note is that the chair uses what is referred to as directional legs. What that means is that the back legs of the chair are referencing the hind legs of the animal, and then the front legs of the chair reference the front legs of the lion. Therefore, we refer to this once again as directional. Another point that I want you to remember is that when we look at these chairs, they've been embellished with inlaid materials. So with this particular chair, it's inlaid with silver, with gold, with the blue lapis lazuli. Previous slides have shown materials such as ivory being inlaid. So just another couple things to note and also to enjoy. One fun fact relating to Egyptian beds and how the Egyptians slept can be illustrated with this slide. What you may think when looking at this piece of furniture is that you may think that this right here is a headboard, when in fact that is totally not the case. The Egyptians would sleep with their heads at this end using what we call a yoke, and then the feet would be down at this end right here. So this is actually a footboard, not a headboard. The procedure for safeguarding one's valuables was very simple during the Egyptian time period. The Egyptian craftsmen would place one knob on the body of the chest, we can see right here, and then another knob located right here on the lid. To ensure that the contents were not tampered with, a piece of twine was wrapped around the two knobs like this in a figure 8 pattern. The string was then secured with melted wax and embossed with an official seal bearing the emblem of the owner. As long as the seal remained intact, the contents were assumed safe. Thanks for traveling with me down the Nile River. I sincerely hope that you've gained a greater appreciation in regards to the ancient Egyptians and their contributions to art, architecture, interiors, and furniture design.